Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One, and this is World DNA. Lots lined up on the show, but first, a look at the headlines. All hospital services besides emergency care to be shut on Saturday across India as medics escalate protests on the Kolkata doctor's rape and murder. This one is called by the Indian Medical Association. Ceasefire talks end in Doha with reports of progress but significant gaps. U.S. President Joe Biden warns all sides not to undermine the peace push. Technical teams will meet to discuss details, and senior officials will reconvene in Cairo next week. No respite in Israel pounding Gaza. Israeli Defense Forces carry out strikes in Khan Yunis and other areas, targeting what they call Hamas hideouts. Thousands told to evacuate within hours. Six killed in Israeli strike on a residential building in South Lebanon early on Saturday. This comes amid Hezbollah's retaliation warning for the killing of its top commander last month. On the campaign trail, Democrat presumptive nominee Kamala Harris unveils economic blueprint heavy on populist measures and fighting inflation. Harris addressed supporters in vital battleground state, North Carolina. SpaceX launches Falcon 9 rocket carrying 116 payloads from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The Transporter 11 mission is SpaceX's 11th dedicated smallsat rideshare mission. Vinesh Fogart hints at making a return to wrestling. Fogart breaks her silence after the Court of Arbitration for Sport's decision to dismiss her appeal. The outrage over the brutal rape and murder of a trainee doctor in India's West Bengal has intensified. The Indian Medical Association, the largest organization of medical staff, has announced a 24-hour nationwide strike. The strike, which started at 6 a.m. today, will be in effect till 6 a.m. tomorrow. During the said period, OPD services will not function and elective surgeries will not be conducted at all government and private hospitals affiliated with IMA. However, emergency services will remain operational. This includes emergency care and critical treatments. IMA has listed 5 demands, including increased hospital security and policy changes. The trainee doctor was found dead in Kolkata's RG Kar Medical College and Hospital last Friday. The postmortem report revealed that she was raped by more than one person before she was strangulated and smothered to death. So far, prime accused Sanjoy Roy has been arrested. The Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, has taken over the case. On Friday, the central agency summoned 4 doctors of the RG Kar Medical College and Hospital. Her death has sparked nationwide protests in Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai, Jalandhar, as well as other cities. People took to streets demanding justice. Meanwhile, West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has held a rally in Kolkata. She demanded capital punishment for the guilty.
We all know big words don't suit you. If you show concern for victims' family, then I don't have a problem. We shouldn't forget BJP killed Bilkis Banu's family. It is BJP who is behind the Unnao and Hathras event in Uttar Pradesh.
The latest talks of ceasefire in Doha has ended without a breakthrough, but technical teams will continue meetings and negotiators will meet again next week in an attempt to end the war. The White House has come up with a new proposal for a deal. Now, reports say there is headway, but nothing concrete yet. President Joe Biden has warned all sides not to undermine the efforts for a ceasefire. Biden said that a deal was nearing, even though it was not there yet.
I'll say one thing about one of the reasons why I was late for y'all was I was dealing with the ceasefire effort in the Middle East. And we are closer than we've ever been. I don't want to jinx anything, but as my grandfather would say, with the grace of God, good little neighbors, a lot of luck, we may have something. But we're not there yet. It was much, much closer than it was 3 days ago. So, take your fingers ago. Thank you.
In a joint statement, the United States, Qatar, and Egypt said that Washington has presented a new proposal for a deal. The statement added that the new proposal was built on points of agreement over the past week, closing gaps between the sides in a way that could allow a rapid implementation of a deal. The hopeful language of the statement may also be aimed at further stalling Iranian retaliation against Israel over the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last month. However, Hamas accused Washington of trying to create a false atmosphere without any genuine intention of stopping the war. Expectations were low for this round of ceasefire talks, which began on Thursday. Hamas, which did not participate directly in the talks, has accused Israel of adding new demands to a previous proposal that had U.S. and international support. Both sides have agreed in principle to a plan that President Biden had announced in May. But Hamas has proposed amendments and Israel has suggested clarifications, leading each side to accuse the other of trying to undermine chances of a deal. Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, stressing the need for de-escalation in Gaza. Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's call for a ceasefire, release of hostages, and the need for continued humanitarian aid. For more on this, we are now being joined by Peter Kuznick. He's a professor of history and director of Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Glad to be with you.
Now, the latest round of Gaza ceasefire talks in Doha has ended without a breakthrough. Now, talks are scheduled in Cairo. Now, U.S. officials do say there has been slight progress. Even President Joe Biden said so. How optimistic are you regarding the talks in Cairo?
Well, the situation certainly looks better today than it did 2 or 3 days ago. Slightly more hopeful. They seem to be actually talking and negotiating, but unfortunately, we're still far from a solution and a resolution. Hamas says in its initial statements that really no progress has been made. Israel is asking for additional conditions that Hamas would find unacceptable. So even though the intention was to bridge the differences between the two sides, that is not very, very easy. Netanyahu has shown no inclination to end this war until Hamas, he says, is completely eliminated. All the experts say that that is impossible. That will never happen. So we have some hope, but we don't have real grounds for optimism yet at this point.
Well, now, with that, a U.S. official has warned that Iran would face what he called a cataclysmic consequences if it strikes Israel. It seems Iran has been closely monitoring these talks. Now, on the other side, there's Hezbollah. What do you make of this?
I see threats going back and forth. The situation is very volatile. Iran has pledged, has vowed, that it's going to retaliate for the 2 killings in Beirut and in Tehran by the Israelis, the 2 assassinations, but they've held off on this in hopes that something concrete would come from these talks. But what the Israeli Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, has been demanding or pressuring the United States and other Western allies to punish Iran seriously if Iran retaliates against Israel. And so what we've got now is the possibility of other European countries and the United States getting directly involved in the fighting, which means that we could have a broad regional war that's going to spiral out of control. So you've got Hezbollah, you've got Hamas, you've got the militias in Syria and Iraq, and you've got Iran on the one side. On the other side, the United States has moved planes into the region, warships, other aircraft carriers. This is a very, very dangerous situation. We could see an explosion of a sort that we've never really seen in the region. And then what does Russia do? What does China do? We don't know how far this could go, which is why everybody has so much hope that some reasonable solution will be found before Iran retaliates, and then Israel and the United States respond, and this can spiral out of control. So reasonable people are certainly trying to find a diplomatic solution, but Netanyahu has not shown any inclination to want to seriously negotiate. And Haniyeh was a more moderate leader who was in charge of the negotiations for Hamas, who was assassinated by Israel. And he's been replaced with somebody who's much more of a hardliner. And so I'm not very optimistic, but we have to cling to whatever hope we can and continue the negotiations and hope that the global community would put pressure. But so long as the United States continues to have Israel's back, regardless of what Israel does, refuses to not only not cut off the arms to Israel, but has now just promised $20 billion of more arms to Israel. As long as that continues, Israel will act with impunity, and the situation will not get any closer to a resolution, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. And now that you mentioned that, Israel is continuing its operation in Gaza, and the humanitarian condition is getting worse there. How important is the ceasefire talks at this point, now that the death count that has crossed 40,000?
It depends on who you ask. There are so many bodies buried under that rubble that do not get counted by the Gazan health authorities. The Lancet, the British medical journal, estimated weeks ago that I think was 186,000 people were actually dead in Gaza. I'm sure by now that figure is over 200,000. So, the situation is even worse. Now we're starting to see polio spreading among children because children have not been able to get their vaccinations. And so we've called for a humanitarian pause. The World Health Organization and others have asked for a humanitarian pause so that they can vaccinate the children to prevent the polio epidemic. So what was a bad situation to begin with really is becoming more and more nightmarish by the day.
All right. We're hoping for the ceasefire talks to be successful. Thank you so much. That was Peter Kuznick joining us on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Moving on, amidst the chaos of Israel-Hamas war and mounting casualties, the world watches with bated breath as Gaza ceasefire negotiations conclude, only to resume in Cairo next week. U.S. President Biden said that the ceasefire deal has never been closer after Washington tried to bridge differences between Israel and Hamas. Our next report sums up the tense situation in West Asia.
Iran-backed Hezbollah has released this propaganda film. Purportedly showcasing underground missile silos and imposing launchers. A chilling reminder of the group's growing arsenal. The Lebanon-based group is boasting of precision-guided missiles and cutting-edge weaponry. Haifa's Kiryat Haim industrial area is feeding residents concerns after Hezbollah revealed that the facility in northern Israel was in its sights.
No, it's not safe anywhere, but this is our home. All this area, it's our home.
Where we are not going to go everywhere. Nowhere.
It's not a secret that our enemies from the north said clearly that one of the goals is to hit the areas of the plants, the areas of the petrochemical industry, when it's so close to the homes of the residents.
In Doha, negotiators are seeking to prevent the spark that could ignite a broader regional inferno.
We affirm that we will spare no effort to reach an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, as this is the basis for de-escalation and easing tensions.
Despite months of intermittent dialogue, fundamental disagreements continue to thwart progress. Israel's unwavering stance on Hamas's destruction clashes violently with the militant group's demand for a permanent ceasefire. As talks limp along, the relentless Israeli offensive persists. The tiny, densely populated Gaza Strip endures a merciless barrage, with new evacuation orders shattering the illusion of safety in the previously designated civilian zones. Palestinian health authorities are reporting over 40,000 deaths in Gaza. For the displaced and desperate, survival has become a grim numbers game.
Today we have reached 40,000 martyrs in Gaza and thousands of injuries. These numbers have become like a numbers game or the stock exchange. There is an increase every day.
The intense negotiations in Doha unfold against a backdrop of heightened regional tensions, as Iran's threats of retaliation for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran loom large. With the latest US intel indicating Iran may attack Israel anytime, Israeli government is reaching out to its Western allies with a plea to stand beside the country in retaliation against Iran. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We move on to the Russia-Ukraine war now. 11 days since beginning, an incursion into Russia, Ukraine continues targeting the enemy's supply routes and logistics. In the latest, Ukrainian forces destroyed a strategically important bridge in Russia's Kursk region. Both Russian and Ukrainian media reported on the damage to the same river bridge, a logistical bottleneck used for delivering equipment to the front line. Amid the increasing attacks, Russian forces destroyed a Ukrainian reconnaissance and sabotage unit that was armed with weapons from NATO countries. According to Russian media, samples of small arms were recovered from the targeted unit near the village of Kremayonoe in the Kursk region. This included Swedish-made automatic carbine 5 assault rifle, as well as US-made M4 carbine assault rifle and M2 Browning machine gun. Moscow has alleged that the West was directly involved in the planning of Ukrainian charge onto Russian soil that began on August 5th. Meanwhile, in East Ukraine, Russia has turned up the heat on enemy forces. Russia said that its forces have captured Sergivka, another frontline village, some 15 kilometers from Ukraine's logistics hub of Pokrovsk. Moscow's forces have been advancing rapidly towards Pokrovsk, prompting Ukrainian military authorities to urge civilians to speed up their evacuation. As the race to the White House heats up, Kamala Harris unveils her economic campaign proposals, vowing to cut taxes, ban price gouging, and build more affordable housing. Presenting her vision for an opportunity economy focused on the middle class, Harris said that the U.S. economy was strong, but prices were still too high.
As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. An opportunity economy. An economy where everyone can compete and have a real chance to succeed.
Significantly, Harris chose North Carolina to make the announcement. The state is one of the 6 battleground states in her contest against Republican nominee Donald Trump. Harris is now leading Trump in 5 of the key swing states. This has been revealed by Nate Silver's polling average on his Silver Bulletin website. The averages already have Harris narrowly ahead in Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. However, Harris is still down in North Carolina. This was her first major economy-focused speech since replacing President Joe Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket. And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tainani has sent us this report. Take a look.
President Kamala Harris unveiled her economic plan in North Carolina, proposing $1.7 trillion in handouts to struggling Americans, including $25,000 for first-time home buyers and up to $6,000 in tax rates for families with young children. She also called for federal price limits on groceries, citing high prices despite improved supply chain. Critics argue that her plan is inflationary on the one hand and would increase deficit, and compared her price control policies to those of Cuba and Venezuela, warning of food shortages as well as business closures. Vice President Harris, for her part, criticized her Republican rival Donald Trump's economic policies, saying they would, quote unquote, devastate the middle class and increase costs. Her plan builds on President Joe Biden's economic platform, reviving or extending temporary measures. However, the plan continues to lack specifics on funding and relies on congressional approval at the end of the day. And so while Harris's plan aims to build on, quote unquote, economic opportunity for the middle class, its feasibility and funding remains unclear. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now we'll take a look at the budget-busting tax proposals from Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as the race to the U.S. presidential elections heats up. Historic references, too, have failed to resonate in the latest race in the United States. Concern over the budget deficit was so widespread in the 1992 U.S. presidential election that business tycoon Ross Perot received nearly 20% of the vote. He was running as an independent. Perot's program was centered around reducing government spending. In his TV infomercial, Perot even took the stance of a school teacher, educating Americans about the nation's budget problems. The business tycoon did not win, but he forced each contender back then to come up with plans to reduce the deficit through economic policy. The victor, Bill Clinton, was able to close the deficit with a fiscal package he pushed through. In 1992, the budget deficit amounted to 4.5% of the U.S. GDP. However, this time around, there are no infomercials to explain deficits. Instead, there are budget-busting proposals from former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. If anything, the Democrat and Republican candidates are in a contest to shell out fiscal goodies. Over the past century, the U.S. budget has been steadily worsening. And this comes at a time when the national debt has hit a record high of $34 trillion. Congressional Budget Office projections show that the deficit will widen to 6.7% of GDP this year, up from 6.3% in the previous year.
Because of Donald Trump, more than...
And that's all on World DNA. Do stay tuned. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
As India celebrates its Independence Day, we tell you how patriotic films have evolved with time. Find out everything about this week's big release 3-2. And meet designer Gaurang Shah as he takes us on an Indian handloom tour. All this and much more with me, Isha Hanspal, at these times only on WION World is One.
This week on the West Asia Post. The threat of a wider war in West Asia triggers high-stakes talks in Doha. Biden expects attack by Iran and its proxies can be delayed if there's a hostage deal. As international mediators push for a ceasefire, Hamas says it is losing faith in the US's role as a negotiator. Also on the show, detained Palestinian narrates harrowing ordeal faced inside Israeli army base. And Hezbollah IDF cross-border fire continues. Catch the West Asia Post at these times only on WION. World is One.
Kenya's President William Ruto swears in his new cabinet secretaries, much to the dissatisfaction of the Gen Zs, who have harnessed the power of social media to fuel wave of protests and political activism against Ruto's 2-year-old administration. From Botswana's Letsile Tebogo, South Sudan's Bright Stars basketballers, and Algeria's legendary boxer Iman Khelif, we highlight the Olympians who broke records and elevated Africa's status at the Paris Olympics 2024. And slap fighting has been gaining traction in South Africa, often drawing crowds. The sport is seen as a positive influence in local communities. That's this week on World of Africa at these times on WION.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to restart again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at yoursarthi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.